Welcome to The Way We Were, a podcast series that is dedicated to the preserving of our local history through video productions. This entire series is made possible by the public service partnership that we have developed with our Tipton Auto Group. My name is Eugene Fernandez. I am the grandnephew of J.G. Fernandez, the subject of this particular podcast. What we have for you today is nothing less than a made-for-movie scenario. We're going to reveal an account that centers upon a larger-than-life figure of our past, almost mythical in his accomplishments during his brief 62 years upon the earth. He shared his birth year with our nation's centennial, so he came in with a bang. J.G. Fernandez descends from Spanish heritage, with his uncle and his father immigrating here in 1856. His uncle, Jose Fernandez Terral, became the patriarch of the family dynasty, amassing a sizable fortune from his merchant activities in the Mexican port of Baghdad during the Civil War. His father was Miguel Fernandez Sr., Jose's younger brother by 2 years. Miguel Sr. had 9 children. By virtue of his having been a family that was among the wealthiest families of Brownsville as he grew up, J.G. Fernandez benefited from that position of prominence through his receiving of an elite social fraternage and a high level of formal schooling that came from such origins. The Incarnate Word Academy and St. Joseph College in Brownsville gave him his early scholastic foundation, and then he journeyed off to the venerable Jesuit institution of Spring Hill College in Mobile, Alabama. After he returned to South Texas, there was a captured moment of a 1985 conversation that I heard directly from a nephew of his. The conversation went as follows. When Uncle J.G. got back from college and was starting to make a life for himself in the business world, he went up to Captain Kelly, that's William Kelly, at the old First National Bank and asked him for a job. He said that he wanted to be a banker. The good captain and his cronies laughed at him, saying that he had no experience. Uncle J.G. left with hurt feelings and went to talk to his father, Miguel Sr. Since his father had been in ranching, he had a close friend, old man Ike Pryor. Now you must understand that Pryor was known to be one of the wealthiest cattlemen in the Southwest. And he had a string of banks, one of which was the Stafford Bank of Columbus, Texas. So it was arranged that Uncle J.G. would go off and do an apprenticeship at that bank. Well, when he got back after a couple of years in Columbus, he had old man Pryor in tow. And beyond that, Uncle J.G. started a bank in the old Puente building, right diagonal from Captain Kelly's bank on 11th and Elizabeth. And old man Pryor signed on as vice president. To make not a long story even shorter, Uncle J.G. was so good at banking that he stole a significant portion of that other bank's business. Boy, did they regret not hiring him. This is the Merchants National Bank. It was built in 1903, the strongest bank in the valley, all through the teens, the First World War, and off into the 20s. Right across the street was its competition, First National Bank of Brownsville. It literally was so prosperous that it ran them into bankruptcy. The first bank that Merchants had was right across the street here on that corner. Then he began erecting a 5-story state bank and trust, which evolved into the State National Bank. Uncle J.G. brought down Atlee Ayers, a renowned architect from San Antonio, in order to design the bank. And for those of you that know San Antonio, the San Antonio Tower Life Building and the Municipal Auditorium and what is called the Taj Mahal at Randolph Field were all designed by Atlee Ayers. The Ashheims, E.H. Goodrich, John McAllen, and old man Ike Pryor were directors. The railroad came to town in 1904, and with it came a flood of land speculators and new customers for his bank. One of these early developers was Mr. Hallam, who, along with Morton and Banker, founded the Laguna Vista Club in about 1907 and the town site of Laguna Vista, along with J.G. Fernandez. Also developed the town site of Los Fresnos. Scott was taken in as the president of State National from 1922 through his death in 1929. A little later on, then you had the gold miners from California, A.C. Brokaw, J.B. Scott. Brokaw developed the El Jardín tract of Frank Rapp, and Scott partnered with J.G. to develop all of West Brownsville. The years from 1914 to 1915 were tragic ones for Uncle J.G. On Valentine's Day of 1914, his newborn daughter didn't make it through her first day of life. Then the following year, his 6-year-old namesake son, little Juanito, drowned on the river while in the care of his wife, Aunt Bess. 1 month later, Aunt Bess committed suicide. J.G. was of extraordinary personal constitution to have gone on, leaving these sadnesses in his past. He dedicated himself to his business interests, finding success in solitude. The State National Bank earned the title of having been the only Valley bank that continually kept its doors open during the Great Depression, which was an enormous feat. J.G. had sold his interest in Merchants National in 1929 to John Gregg, just before the fall of the market. Merchants merged with the venerable First National in 1933 in an attempt to stave off failure, but this was to no positive avail. John Gregg and other bank officers were sentenced to federal prison for certain improprieties that went against the policies of the bank examiners of that trying period. The late 1920s into the 1930s perhaps marked the pinnacle of J.G. Fernandez's achievement period, and I'm referring to the work that he contributed towards the building of the Port of Brownsville. It's a bold statement, but it is likely true that the port project could not have gotten off the ground to the degree that it did and yield us the port that we have without the efforts of J.G. Fernandez and his friendship with the higher-ups in Washington, such as the Vice President of the United States, John Nance Garner, who worked diligently on this project, and of course Milton West, who was our congressman at the time. They were great friends of J.G. Fernandez. During this period between 1903 and 1933, John Nance Garner was our district congressman, and he became very close friends with Uncle J.G. Then from 1933 through 1941, Garner was the Vice President of the United States under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Uncle J.G. was a charter member of the Brownsville Navigation District and its early predecessors of committees. Roosevelt focused critical legislation on the development of our nation's ports and harbors. He was having difficulty getting some of his bills through Congress, and this is when a personal conversation took place. V.P. Garner liked to come down from Uvalde and or Washington and hunt doves on our ranch during hunting season periodically. Our ranch at that time was the 6,000-acre tract known as Rancho Viejo. One year, right around 1933, this conversation took place. Jack, this is J.G. Are you coming down for hunting season this year? Well, there's something that I want to talk to you about. When Garner arrived, he asked, J.G., what was that issue that you wanted to talk to me about? Well, Jack, you know that little problem that FDR is having with Congress over his rivers and harbors bills? We have a project down here that will give a lot of positive press towards the acceptance of those bills. It's called the Deepwater Port Project. Throughout the following days, these two men chatted on this issue, ending with a handshake from Vice President Garner saying, I'll get you your port, and the rest is history. The $4 million plus in bonds were issued to the State National Bank, and the Port of Brownsville opened up in the summer of 1936. Another direct conversation. Uncle Miguel, J.G.'s brother, summoned his son Louis and said, give me a ride to the bank. We're going to have a bonfire. He actually burned the surplus bonds left over from the port project, about $1 million worth of bonds in the lobby of the State National Bank. Uncle J.G. said that he didn't want the citizens of Brownsville to be saddled with a debt burden for that amount of money. And he was afraid of some kind of unscrupulous siphoning off of those funds, and he would have nothing to do with that. Many of the citizens of the lower Rio Grande Valley urged J.G. to take more of a spotlight in the ceremonies that surrounded the opening of the port in 1936, but he refused to do so. The Valley chapter of LULAC at that time even passed a charter resolution that they submitted to the Brownsville City Commission, which called for the changing of the street name that led to the port to be Fernandez Boulevard. But J.G. flatly objected, saying that there were many good people that worked on this project and it would be wrong of him to take all of the glory. Silently to us, he had a saying: fools' names and faces appear in public places, to further give you an idea of how he shunned the spotlight. That particular street was named 14th Street after that incident. Right upon that period, a wealthy railroad magnate settled in Brownsville from his home state of Oklahoma. His name was Hubert R. Hudson. He was so taken by the Rio Grande Valley that he sold all of his railroad stock and moved here. Plus, he made an offer to J.G. to buy out his controlling interest in State National Bank, and Hudson did so, at the tune of $300,000 in 1936. And he also bought controlling interest in the three Valley newspapers, the Herald, the Monitor, and the Star. He said that he wanted to be a big fish in a small pond, and he certainly was. J.G. was looking so forward to retiring from the intense life of a banker, capitalist, and developer that he had held over the last 4 decades. He remained on for a short period of time after the buyout and occupied the post as a director of the bank. He had just spent $200,000 on a purchase to buy out his cousin's estate and acquire the Rancho Viejo plantation. Then in February of 1939, he went home for lunch, sat down at the table and announced, "I am so hungry I could die." And he did. Being that Uncle J.G. had no children, his assets inured to his siblings, primarily his brother Albert and his sister Maria Butler, hence the Fernandez Butler Properties as it was painted on the estate office door. Headed by J.G., the Miguel Fernandez Sr.'s estate office maintained a presence upon the 4th floor of State National, the last office unit on the left overlooking Mexico, for 24 years. This command post was under his captainship. When he passed, Uncle Albert filled that slot for the following 28 years until Uncle Albert died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head in 1967. Why suicide? We will never know the complexities of that answer, but apparently Albert was a lonely soul internally. With me, he certainly hid it well. I remember visiting him in his office many times, stemming from the mid-1950s up until the mid-1960s, when I would drop by and ask him to buy St. Joe lottery tickets, for which he was very generous. We would chat at length on trivial subjects, and he always appeared to be very happy to see me. Uncle Albert was married for a brief period of 10 years between 1927 and 1938. His wife Annazelle died within a year of his brother's death. He never remarried, although he made a journey back to Spain in 1956 to find a new bride. That endeavor, sadly, was fruitless. He apparently had great hopes of moving on in his life, being that he hired a new housekeeper and even contracted to have her trained in culinary fine points while he was abroad. Upon Albert's passing, his assets went to his siblings' families, being that he had no children. The estate office was taken over by a favorite nephew, Anthony Gomez, son of his sister Rosalie Fernandez Gomez. Uncle Tony held that office until he closed it down about 10 years later. The bank had changed hands several times up to that point, beginning with J.G.'s tenure. Then it shifted to Hudson's control from 1937 until 1941. Then it was bought out by Harry Scott, who held it until 1954. The actual bank entity of the First National moved out in 1958 to new quarters on Levee Street. Then the Moody interests of Galveston stepped in and held the property, which was called the Security Building. In 1964, it was sold to Rodolfo and George Somino. That team held it for about 10 years and then passed it over to Harriet Holzman. He held it for the longest period, about 40 years, until it was finally transferred to CDCB in the year 2021. Quite a story, eh? As is the case with so many of Brownsville's icons of commercial architecture, if one takes them at face value, it merely focuses on lifeless brick and mortar. All of a sudden, if you look at it deeper, huge historical figures enter into the picture. Legendary Texas ranchers, political figures on a national level, the great land developers of the bygone era. Their ghosts emerge and walk through the hallways and flow through the doors. Transcending deeper subcutaneously, a picture emerges of exquisite color and charm. That's the full picture. That is when buildings are elevated to the higher value of being assets in our heritage tourism inventory, not to mention yielding back an element of cultural pride, and the rest is history.